はい、皆さんこんにちは、神谷宗幣です。今日は、オーストラリアのですね、キャンベラに来まして、ハミルトン教授にですね、インタビューをしたいと思います。ハミルトン教授は、こちらの本を、サイレントインベーションですね。はい、こちらを昨年出版されておりまして、これがもうすぐ日本語に翻訳されるということですので、その発売前にですね、ご本人にインタビューをして、我々のメッセージもいただきたいと思います。
I decided to write the book only in 2016 when I read some newspaper stories which showed that there was a worrying level of interference in Australian politics by the Chinese Communist Party, including working through the Chinese diaspora in this country. And it seemed to me, someone who'd never worked in this area before, that Australia has a big problem. And so I went to talk to the experts, and they told me more quite worrying information. And I asked them, is anybody else writing a book like this? And they said no, and they encouraged me to do it. And so I decided to write the book, and as I researched the book and wrote it in 2017, I became increasingly amazed at the level of interference and influence by the Chinese Communist Party in Australia. And so that's what I put into the book. Mm-hmm. Well, the context of the book, Silent Invasion, was very much an emerging national debate in Australia about the influence of the Chinese Communist Party in Australia, including through the Chinese Australian community, but also targeting Australia's elites, political elites, elites in business, elites in universities, and having through the co-optation of those elites, having a major influence over those institutions. And there was a growing concern in the intelligence community, out there in the general public of Australia, among the media, who started to write very important news stories about CCP influence in Australia. And so I did not know this when I decided to write the book, but the book was published in February of 2018 at kind of the perfect time, just when Australians were asking, well, what is all this about? We can see there's a problem here, but we don't understand the context, we don't understand the framework, we don't understand how the CCP operates and why it is operating that way. Mm-hmm. And as you know, Australia has been at the forefront of CCP influence operations. Well, you know, some people in Taiwan and Japan may disagree with that. And certainly in the Western world, Australia has been at the forefront of CCP interference and influence. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a tremendous amount of interest in the issue and my book from the United States, from Canada, from Europe, Germany, for example. Many people interested to learn from the Australian experience.
Okay.
Well, Australia has had quite a vigorous national debate about CCP influence in this country over the last 2 years. And there is now much higher awareness in the public mind, but also among elites, about the dangers of the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to undermine Australia's independence and corrupt our democratic values. And so the government has taken some very significant measures to try to protect Australia from CCP influence and interference. Last year, some new laws were passed which make it a criminal offence to undertake many of the kinds of activities I describe in my book, foreign interference activities. And foreign interference is defined in the new law as any activity that's undertaken secretly or covertly on behalf of a foreign principal, foreign power, or someone representing a foreign power, and which is aimed at influencing a government process or interfering with the exercise of a democratic right. And I thought, well, that covers a lot of the activities and behaviours I talked about in my book. So we've yet to see how effective that law will be. It's a bit too soon. But we also introduced some other laws like an equivalent of kind of Foreign Agents Registration Act. And also we're protecting our critical infrastructure, like our ports and electricity networks and certainly telecommunications networks. We're protecting them from foreign actors or foreign investors, particularly from China, who might act on behalf of the state rather than in purely commercial terms. So there's been a very high level of awareness about the danger that the Chinese Communist Party poses to Australia's independence and our democratic rights. But we still have a very long way to go. Sometimes when I visit state capitals like Perth or Melbourne, I realise that the message has really yet to spread out to the states, to the other prefectures and provinces. So we still have a long way to go, and the Chinese Communist Party has, if anything, stepped up its activities in Australia. So we have to fight hard to protect ourselves from the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay.
Well, it was most interesting because within a few days of Silent Invasion being published, it became the number one non-fiction bestseller on Japanese Amazon. And we were sitting around saying, well, that's weird. But it turns out, for English language titles, of course. And so that sent a very strong message to me. Hey, there are a lot of Japanese people very interested in this question. And they're asking themselves, how much can we learn from Australia? But I think it's also true that we in Australia have a lot to learn from Japan, because CCP influence in Japan has been occurring over a long period and has gone very deep into Japan's institutions. And I think there is a growing awareness that democratic nations in Asia, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Indonesia, and a couple of others, need to act together to protect democracy from the subversion of the Chinese Communist Party, which we know is actively hostile to democracy and yet will use democracy, will use the rights and institutions of democracy in order to advance its influence in countries like Japan and Australia. So the Chinese Communist Party uses democracy to undermine democracy, and we all need to recognise that and put up a, let's say, a united front against the influence of the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay.
Well, I hope it won't be too long.
Thank you for today.
A pleasure. Thanks. Thank you.